Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Google Marketing Platform Academy. Um, today, today me and Selene are going to be speaking about server-side GTM. Great to have you all here. We'll be speaking for about 30 to 45 minutes, going over some different things about server-side tag management. We will try to make some time for questions at the end. And yeah, great to be here. Selene, do you want to kick on to the intro and agenda slides, and we'll go over the different areas we'll cover today?
Yes.
Awesome.
Hi everyone, I'm Solène. I'm a technical specialist based in Amsterdam, and I support our large advertiser with their measurement and tagging questions.
Awesome. And my name's Emil. I'm from Sweden, but I work in the Google Dublin headquarters. Currently, like many of you, working from home. I worked on the Google Marketing Platforms team for 3 years, and I specialized as an account manager with data integration and measurement project, which GTM is a big part of. So yeah, great to be here. Yeah, let's get started. Cool. So today, me and Selene, we're gonna do our best to try to explain the different sides of the new features within Google Tag Manager, Google and the server-side beta. I'm gonna kick off and just try to start from scratch and kind of build up to what exactly is Google Tag Manager and what is the difference to the Google Tag Manager we know and what's new. And then I'm gonna hand off to Selene, who's gonna go into a bit more detail about the cookies and different types of cookies we can use and the server managed IDs, which is a big part of the kind of value proposition of server-side Google Tag Manager. And then we're going to finish off with kind of a how to get started for anyone who's interested to kind of pursue this product and this implementation today. And then we're going to end off with a Q&A. So please, submit your questions. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll do our very, very best to answer. Awesome. Yeah. So why don't we get started? So server-side GTM. This is kind of, I think, a really, really hot topic when we speak about server-side in the industry. So I want to kind of just back up a little bit and explain like what is Google, what is a tag management solution at first. And I love to think back of when I started working in digital marketing. We used to pixels were kind of key to everything that was was the key to digital ads and measurement, digital ads, because the ability to measure the performance of our marketing campaigns was revolutionary, right? It really changed the way that we bought and bought media and the way that we personalized creatives to our users, and we were able to do things that we were not able to do before with traditional media, right? But to implement these pixels and tracking, which is really different types of scripts, we had to add code to our website. So one of my first jobs was actually to do just that, actually go in, ask for access to my clients' websites when I was working in an agency, and I would literally like copy paste JavaScript onto websites so that these pixels could fire, they could load different scripts, and they could perform the functions that they needed to do by talking to other servers like ad servers or analytics servers and things like that, right? So this was great. It created new functionality that we needed to measure our marketing, but it came with there were some things that weren't great, right? It wasn't really convenient to touch the code of the website every time we wanted to make a change to marketing tags, right? Made us prone to human error. If I made a mistake as a marketer, the whole site could go down, or there could be issues which we didn't really want. It was also really hard to kind of monitor and maintain by writing code directly on the site. So instead, we created a tag to host the tags or a script to load the scripts, which is really, really great. Because that way we had more control and we could update these tags, and we can kind of manage all of these pixels in a much better way. So really, really great. So conversion tracking, site analytics, a lot of different tags and pixels. We could host them all in a container which we could then manage from a different UI, and we didn't have to actually touch the code of the website all the time. Yeah, so really great concept, but it did come with a couple of not so great things, right? By loading a lot of third-party scripts onto our site, we didn't always have so much control about exactly what was loaded, what information was captured on site, and where it exactly was going. So I think there was a bit of a need, there was a bit of a need to kind of create more control around this, and maybe also, if we have a lot of requests going out, that could actually create a lot of weight on the website, make it quite slow. It also, because all of these scripts can sometimes interfere with each other, and also sometimes access each other's information, it can also present a security risk. Okay, so then if you wouldn't mind skipping to the next slide. So with server-side tagging, we want to bring the same concept of tag management, but actually away from the client side or the browser or the app, but bring it to a more safe environment like the server. So we're actually running that container in the server and not in the client or in the browser. I'm referring to client and advertisers here, but really it's just, I'm trying to just say anybody who is the owner of a website or app here. So bear with me as I try to use these terms interchangeably. So with a server-side container, we can actually do the same thing that we could do with a client-side container, and we can actually help control how those, instead of having requests, from going to multiple endpoints right from the browser, we streamline that flow, and we can control which, we can actually send those requests to our own server container and then control where those requests go. I'm going to go into more detail on this, and Solange is much more knowledgeable about this, so I might lean on her to fill in the gaps a bit later. And one important thing to note, right, is that this is the server-side tagging features is available for both Google Tag Manager free and 360. Yeah, so there's no cost with the product itself. There are, of course, some costs of running a server in a cloud environment, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But there's no anybody's available who uses Google Tag Manager can use this pretty much today. Great. Yeah. So how does this work? So the way, if we start off with in this example, we have an example.com website where we have a tag manager client container which runs on JTag.js, for those of you who are familiar with the different script libraries that we have. And JTag.js can be used to collect data from the site. If we think about things like, it can pick up things from the data layer, it can pick up things from the browser and then pass that on to a web client. The web client can also place something called a first-party HTTP cookie. I'm not going to touch on that too much. I'm going to let Solange speak about the differences of the different cookies that can be placed. But we load the tag manager container. It can then pass information from the site to the tag manager server container, right? So we think of the web container kind of like a listener that can capture this information, and then in this container we can control where this data then gets passed on to. So we might want to route that to an analytics server, for example, or we may want to do, maybe we want to modify that data in some way before sending it off to those third-party endpoints. And that way we have more control and more security instead of just letting them completely fly off uncontrolled. Cool. Solange, is there anything I missed here that we want to cover on this slide before we move forward?
No, I think it was quite understandable. Something maybe is like if you see on the left side, you can also, so you can receive information from your clients, so client containers, so the website, but you can also enrich the data from your server container with other like databases or other endpoint like CRM database. So instead of passing some sensitive information to the browser and bringing it to the server, you can also from now on have directly this server-to-server integration that is safer to process data.
That's a really good point. And I think, when we say client and browser, really here, this could be any data source. It's not limited to app and websites, but we can be really, really creative here about where we want to send data and what we can send them all to this server container, and then control and where those requests ultimately go in the end. Awesome. Can I skip on to the next slide?
Yeah.
Cool. So a little bit of a side-by-side comparison here, and this is we starting with ease of implementation. At the moment, it is easier to get going with a client-side tagging solution. It requires less work for the advertiser or anybody who wants to implement. However, we are definitely building towards a future where implementing a server-side tagging solution should be much easier, if not as easy as a client-side tagging solution. But at the moment, it is a little bit more takes a little more time to actually set these things up. In my experience, though, I do find that it is a bit more work up front, but once everything is kind of set up, it's not much different once you are a marketer practicing. The UI looks very, very similar, and once the heavy lifting is done, it's not that much of a difference. If we think about, as I mentioned, the word security, control, and reliability, and this is really the key difference. We can definitely do a lot more with a server-side container. I don't want to go into too many use cases, but like you could, for example, remove certain points of data that could be considered sensitive, or even in some regulatory environments would be considered PII. You could make sure to to remove those data points before they ever get sent off to any third party, for example. And this is more difficult to do with a client-side tagging solution because you wouldn't have that control over what scripts are loaded and how they function. Regarding cost, I touched upon this a little bit. There is a little bit of cost in terms of actually running your own server in a cloud environment. Does come with some costs. However, these can be managed quite well, and if you have experience running any type of cloud services, this is nothing new to you, and it should not be something difficult to manage. But it does have a cost that the client-side tagging solution does not have by default. In terms of site performance, if we are able to reduce the number of scripts that are loaded and also the number of connections made to third parties by those scripts, we can actually reduce load time, which load time is highly it's highly correlated to conversion rates and actually user experience performance. So this can help boost the performance of your entire site, while also just keeping it safer. So server-side tagging solution here definitely has improvements compared to the client-side tagging solution. Cool. And I'll go ahead, Selene. I was just gonna pass it over to you.
Anything, or maybe do you want to highlight anything before I switch to cookies and server managed IDs?
I think no. Let's move on. I think if there's any questions, we'll cover those off in the end. So please submit your questions if you have any.
Okay, so now I will touch upon cookies and server managed IDs. So what is a cookie? Like before we start with cookies, I think I would like to highlight that And I got the question in the last session with GTEC.js. It's really important to differentiate first-party data that come from your databases that get your user ID information and all the login information. So much more PII data, first-party data, and data that are collected on site with first-party cookie. So that's two different things. So first, I would like to set the ground. So what is a cookies and what are cookies? Because now we are adding a layer of cookie. So as you know, in the industry, with the new regulation, third-party cookies are now more legacy cookies. We are using them less and less. And what are they? Sorry, let me start with the definition. It's a small piece of text that is set on the browser level and on the device level. So we'll have two different cookies if you come from your mobile or your desktop. And they contain some information like little identifier. Often it's a random numbers. And it's set on your domain or on someone else's domain, and at the expiration date. So what switch a third party from a first party cookie is actually the domain name that is set in the cookie. So a third party cookie, if you are in example.com, and you have a cookie google.com, that would be a third-party cookie. If you're on example.com and you get a cookie that is set on example.com, it would be a first client-side cookie. So how can you differentiate? So it's a bit of checking within the dev tool, or there are a few extensions that actually helps you to know what is the domain where the cookie is set, and that will make the first differentiation between your different cookie client side. So client side is always I will repeat it, but I think it's better to set the ground clearly. Client side is just cookie set from the browser. So we have a JavaScript running that will set the cookie. Then last but not least, it's not new, but within Google, we are introducing as well HTTP cookie. So basically, it's set by the advertiser server. So it's set by example.com server. So I will go a bit more into details about how to set it up in the next slide. Or something to really, and I will repeat it again. So you need to actually, it needs to be set on the server, on the advertiser server. So that's really important. So how to actually enable first HTTP cookies with server managed ID. So this new idea, I think I forgot to actually mention it, is first party identifier. So that's how if you see FPID, so that's the general naming for actually first HTTP cookie. And how does it work is basically the value stored will in the set by your server. So your server sets the cookie will be communicated to Google, if you use Google Analytics, to Google Analytics endpoints, and Google Analytics will save it and instead of client ID, for example. So that's how it works. So how to use it, there is a screenshot on the right. So within your server container and your client, so really it's important to actually think about the client as a listener, but that will also make the link between your web container in that case and your server side text. So really it's important to keep the first diagram into mind and this web client, and that's where the HTTP cookie will be set. or FPID. And here you have, like, as you can see on the screenshot, you have a few settings that you can set up within the client again. So right now within server-side GTM, we have two clients. We have the analytics, so universal analytics client, and the GA4 client. Up. Value proposition, back to you.
Cool. Yeah, and I don't know, I think you mentioned it there, but I think just one key thing that took me a little while to realize as well is that a first-party HTTP code can only be read by the server that set it, which is a much more safe and robust way, because you're not, for example, you wouldn't then expose sensitive data like user IDs to any third-party tag that's on your site, right? Which is really amazing. So yeah, back to the benefits and why we would want to do this. If we have a streamlined data flow, we can actually monitor and see where these requests go in a much better way, so that we can control to make sure that the data is only sent to exactly where we want it to and nowhere else, and that no other data that we don't want sent anywhere is sent. We can also remove the number of scripts. Sometimes scripts are loaded unnecessarily, even when they're not in use. This can increase performance. We're running less code, which is better for the user and is better for your business. And better security. I just mentioned this with the cookie, but the risk of data leakage can be significantly reduced, considering the big changes we've seen this year in regulatory requirements and tracking becoming quite difficult. And this is definitely top of mind for at least all of the advertisers that I work with. And managing IDs from a server is probably a lot better than running it through your browser. This is going to set the stage for much more robust ads measurement that is less reliant on these JavaScript first-party cookies.
So now thank you, Emil. Now let's get into details on how to get started. First is to evaluate if it's right for your advertiser. Shall you move towards server-side tagging? I think, again, it's important to set the ground. There is a lot of changing in the ecosystem. Of course, in terms of privacy regulation, and also like general security. So it's really important to think what is the most viable and secure in the next couple of years, and already set the ground. And we saw already some advertiser thinking about creating their own enrichment service. So basically a server services to pass the data to the different endpoints. So that's the moment where you can come in and say, okay, there is server-side tagging with GTM. So something to always keep in mind is, for now, it is attached to like a web container. So you can't use the server-side tagging only on its own, because you still need to listen to few information that happens on the web container. So that's something always. So right now they are working hand in hand. Few things to keep in mind, but it will for sure. So if you have advertiser with slow website, you can actually tell them, okay, how many tags do you have? Make a quick run through like the GTM, make a quick audit. If you have around 170 tags, that's a bad sign, and that means that there is information that you can already enrich from the backend. So instead of having information that comes from your web container, that will run a lot of custom HTML code to prepare the data and make it like nice and smooth to send it to the different endpoints. That's actually things that you should do on client side. So that's a few tags that could actually move server side. So yeah, really look into custom HTML tag and and that would be a good hint to know like if you should go towards server-side tagging to unload the container. Of course, the security. So if there is, in terms of like clients type, we know like when you have PII information or when you deal with a lot of PII information, you don't want it to appear in the front end. So the less information that are in the front end, the more secure your website is. So really, it's important to think about all the data that are in the front end, within the browser, in the front end within the browser, that you could move like server side. So that's always like for clients like dealing with a lot of PII data again. And of course, when you have when you want like to have a better performance of your overall tags, and also Google tags now, because we have the HTTP cookie, so I think it's really high value in collaboration with all our tags and how they work together. So a few caveats, I think still to mention. So we still, like as I mentioned before, it still works hand in hand with the client-side Google Tag Manager. So you need to have GTM web container onto your website. So that's something to keep in mind. You need to, for now, be willing to use Google Cloud. And so you can, like, I will show you, like, in the next slide, we have some server provision for you. We often, like, if you start running on live environment, what we advise is actually to have 3 servers, because you don't want to have an outage, because this will actually lead into a loss of data. So it's really important to have, like, once you go with live data, to have, we advise for now to have 3 servers, with flexible provisioning. And in general, we estimate the cost for a server between $30 to $50. So considering that you have 3 servers, so around $120 per month. So it's a bit of extra cost on top. Always to keep in mind. And we have, so if you remember, we have the web container, and then we have the server container with the web client and the server tag. And for now, for the server tag, we have Google Analytics 4, Universal Analytics, and measurement protocol supported. We have also like the possibility to have HTTP tags, but that will need like some development on your side. So that's always like the caveat, that it requires maybe for the setup a bit more support from developers. But once it's set up, it works exactly the same way as the Google Tag Manager. So it has variables, triggers, and tags. So how to get started? It's quite straightforward. So if you go within the UI and you want to create a new container, you have now the possibility to create server container. So that's how you can, it goes after IMP container. So I think pretty straightforward, nothing to add here. So to get started, so I will really like to get, because look, the concept like seems really easy to understand, but I think it makes sense to start to play with it. So really, we started with an automatically provisioned server. We still request a billing account, but it's provisioned with $300 free of charge, so it can already get you started, give you an idea on how to use server-side GTM without the cost. So yeah, like as I was mentioning, when you think you have like instance up and running with data, it will be $120 per month, and we have $300 already provisioned for your server-side tag manager. So like if you just want to test, send some it will cost you like nothing. So once you actually create your tagging server, you linked it with your billing account, you will see like this server created like, how do you say, pop-up, and then you have the default URL. So like if you check the first screenshot, keep in mind the default URL will be the endpoint that will be sending data towards analytics. So it's really like if you are testing like the server and the deployment of the server, you can see in the developer tools that actually the collect request is no more sent from Google Analytics /collect. It will be sent by this GTM / your container ID and then .appspot.com. So that's a good way for you to actually start debug and look into the network tab, how it will look like in the future. And yeah, like a quick shows of the UI. So like as I was mentioning, you have exactly the same thing as the normal GTM container. The only thing that is on top is actually the clients. The clients are those adapters between, so they are connected with the different device of their users, the website, and they bring the data basically from the web container. They listen to the web container data, and they bring it to the server as an event that can be then processed and sent afterwards back to the different endpoints. So endpoint meaning whatever other third parties that you are using on your website. So yes, you have like the tags, triggers, variables, folders, and templates. So I know there are a few, a few templates that are in the making from our partners. So as I said, check it out. It's really, it's really important to actually get a feeling within the interface on how it's working. And I think we're up for Q&A and a question if there is any.
Cool. Yeah, so we got a couple of questions. So Maxime asks, what is the relation of server-side tracking with GA4? Does it only work with GA4 or any GA? So as it is right now, the Google Analytics and Google Analytics 4 and also Google Analytics 360 is supported. And there were a lot of questions about, so yes, both are supported right now. And that leads me on to another question that was asked, which is asking when will there be more integrations like Google Ads and Floodlight? We don't have any information regarding when exactly that, when that is happening. But I can say that our engineering teams are working very, very hard to bring more integrations for our other marketing products.
So I think I can go for, do you have an estimated cost for our advertiser? As I was mentioning, that's like the $30 to $50 per server, depending on how much data you are actually sending. And we, like, when you have, like, it depends also of the amounts of data that you are sending. But yeah, like $120 per month on average, we estimated.
There's a question here around collecting data for remarketing audiences. My understanding is that to do that right now, you still need to run a client-side implementation. So for those use cases, it's recommended to do a hybrid while the product is in beta. Hybrid model being having a client-side tag and a server-side tag.
Yeah, so there is a lot of integration coming down the road, so we can't give a clear timeline yet, but yeah, all server side tags is in the pipeline. We have, of course, the ads integration in the pipeline. So stay tuned. I will recommend really, like, for once, I think our documentation is really great. So like the server side Google Tag Manager documentation has been really well made. So please review it and stay in touch for like upcoming features. There are also like famous partners that are really like checking everything quite accurately. So follow them, and you will be quite surprised of what will come, what will be coming in the next months.
Awesome. And I have a question here from Aaron. Are there any slides we can share with our clients? So yeah, please, you should reach out to your Google point of contact. I do think there are some resources available, but there are definitely more coming as well.
Our apps has the checkout process within the web view. The analytics tagging is done within the app, but can we also send the analytics data directly to the SGTM client from our backend? Yes. So there are possibility if you use a GA4 Universal Analytics through measurement protocol. I think I didn't mention it quite clearly, but we do support measurement protocol, so this is possible. Yeah, how long can we reduce the load? We don't have yet, to be honest. I think it will depend also of how many tags you have in your web container. So if you already did optimization using a custom table, removing unused tags, removing unused triggers, so there are a few things to always keep in mind. Limiting the amount of custom HTML tag that you're having. That's already like few steps to reduce your web container. So depending on that, yeah, you can reduce quite easily. If you have a lot of custom HTML tag, you can reduce quite easily the loading time of your page.
Yeah, and exactly. So it's depends on how many libraries and tags and requests you have going on. But I would recommend there's a lot of great thought leadership on exactly how, and guides out there exactly how to do this. So yeah, please just have a Google on these type of articles. I know like Simo Ahava has been really, really great at in-depth guides on how to do exactly that. So check that out.
So I think there is a bit more complex from Maxime. So basically what I can always mention, it's like to use HTTP cookie, it's important that you're actually hosting the server container on your server. So this will actually like enable the fact that you can set the cookie as HTTP cookie. Otherwise, you won't be able to set the cookie as HTTP cookie.
I see that there are some questions around like regulation and tracking prevention and things like that. So I just want to point out that this is you have to always consult your legal teams about whether something is allowed or not. Just because it's technically possible does not mean that you should be doing it. You should always adhere to the regulatory environment that you are in, and also to respect policies of browsers and so on. So yeah.
Are those JavaScript still being loaded by server-side container, or do I need to dual setup? So how does it work? Is basically so you will have a page view tag within your web container, and then you will use transport URL to set actually like the domain or the endpoint that will receive the information. And then in your client, so in your server, you will also have it's not a JavaScript. Yes, it is. So yeah, you will have also in your server container another tag, analytics tag, listening. So yeah, you will have two JavaScripts basically.
And there's a question here if consent mode is supported by server-side GTM, and it is, and it's a great use case to use those in combination. So yes, it is available. Okay, we're running towards the end of the questions. See if there's any we have missed. Yeah, there are some questions here about use cases outside of Google Analytics and Google Analytics 4. Until there are more integrations, the use cases are limited to those, just because that's where the product is right now. As more integrations launch, there'll be more and more use cases.
So yeah, thank you, Emil. I think it's important to say that there are it's actually partners that will already working on some tag templates, so stay tuned. That's why I really mentioned look within your server-side container for tag templates, and check what has been done also in the industry. So there are already some great work that have been done. Yeah, so GTM server side can be integrated with GA4. I think that's for now one of the few cases of tags that we're having. And how long can you use automatically provision servers for without running? So it's $300. So it's really depending on the amount of data and how much actually you will run the provision server for. What you need to understand is that the transport URL is an HubSpot domain. So it's if you want to use some functionalities, this is not it's once you run on live data, it's better to switch to your own server. So I will say as soon as you want to really get into it, switch to a flexible server and not a provision server. But with the 300, I will say at least, depending really again on the amount of data that you are processing, but I will say at least if you're not a big website, at least 6 months.
So one question that appeared here is that how do you run a hybrid client-side and server-side container at the same time? So I would want to say that to maintain functionality, there are only a couple of GA4 and Google Analytics tags that you can actually run through the server-side container right now. So you will still need to maintain if you have client-side tags going, you still need to keep those for now. But the way I would approach is start thinking about what could be moved over to a server-side container. And also, it's not don't flip everything all at once. You can actually start small, like Sven said, start setting everything up, maybe running maybe some basic page view tracking, get an understanding for how the product works, and then slowly roll it out more and more and more. And then you can also monitor your costs slowly, and it doesn't create any sudden shock to your way of working. So definitely do it piece by piece, and take your time and get used to it. It's a new way of working as well. Okay. All right, I think we're almost out of time. So then, were there any last questions that you want to cover before we end?
No, I think I went I see a lot of duplicates. Yeah, I think.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure hosting you, and I hope that the information we shared was useful, and I hope that you're excited about using server-side GTM. I'm just thinking, is there anything in the information we need to share about the live stream before we jump off? or maybe we've shared everything. I'm sure I think there'll be follow up by email, and everyone's subscribed. So the GMP on our team, I'm sure, will be in touch to follow up with resources and stuff like that. Yeah, so thank you so much, and have a lovely day and week.
Thank you. We will share the documentation in the follow-up email. Thank you again.